Do you ever ask yourself, am I playing too small? Have I left it too late to start afresh? Will I come to the end of my life and feel that I somehow let myself down? This is your invitation to hear from some amazing people who have asked themselves those very same questions and chose to wake the F up, to get off the hamster wheel of mediocrity and seize the life that was calling them. Be inspired and be challenged to discover who you have the potential to become and the contribution you're here to make. And now, here to guide you on the most important quest of your life is your host, Janet Hogan.
We talk about midlife crises, but what happens when you have your first serious breakdown at 20, followed by a cataclysmic one at 40? You know, it'd be enough to make you think that someone up there really had it out for you. For my next guest, solving the puzzle of herself would see her studying at the feet of His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, spending a year in a monastery living like a monk, starting up a multi-million-dollar coffee empire, going bankrupt, enduring a crippling marriage breakup, and ending up in the middle of the Amazon jungle experiencing the hallucinogenic effects of ayahuasca that would lead her to confronting the phantasmagorical cast of demons that had been stewing in her subconscious. If anyone has truly lived out the hero's journey, it's this woman who has emerged from her personal purgatory to become a truly inspirational leading light. Simone Dowding, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to Wake the F Up. You've certainly dedicated your life to that quest of waking yourself up.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Just beautiful to be here. And yeah, it is very poignant, you know, your name and how we met, the synchronicities. And, you know, I think I was giving a talk on the heroine's journey, which is about the dark night of the soul. And I think it's great to destigmatize that journey and for people to understand that it's a necessary part of spiritual awakening.
I love your take on that. So creating a universality around it. And I'd like you to speak to that because in a previous conversation you shared with me, you spoke about the reason that you put yourself through the extraordinary things that you did was a quest to be a better version of yourself. Can you speak to that quest, that desire to find out more about yourself? Can you tell us about that? And did you feel in some way that you weren't okay? Well, what was that better version of yourself?
Yeah, I think, look, I struggled with what would traditionally be mental illness or clinical depression for a long time until I sort of started to reframe it and to think differently when I went over to the Dalai Lama in India and discovered Eastern mysticism, because it was only then that I realised that this is a natural part of evolution, that this is, and even in the Indigenous cultures as well, and the shamanism I explored later, that this was a very necessary thing to start to question your reality, to question your culture, to question who I was. That was the existential crisis that I was in. And, you know, I felt like I had achieved everything that society told me that I should in terms of success. I had everything. I had the millions of dollars, the great cars, you know, everything. And I still felt unfulfilled. I felt unhappy. And I think that I felt like basically I'd been lied to in some way. So, you know, for a long time I've been a spiritual seeker, just seeking, well, what does this mean? You know, what does this mean for me on earth? What does this mean for me and my family? What is this journey? Like, what are we here for? You know, so those questions were asked by me at a very young age. I think I studied psychology at university and that helped a lot too. And I'll never forget seeing a picture that the lecturer put up of a monk that had set himself on fire. And he was in complete and utter peace, just sitting there in meditation, just all the light. And I remember thinking, the mind is an extraordinary thing. If he can cope with that much suffering, you know, who are we as human beings? Like, what's our potential here? You know, what is it that I haven't discovered about the mind and myself that's out there? So it really did sort of get me on track with this journey in terms of knowing or feeling or intuitively knowing that there was more to our human existence.
And yeah, so it's really interesting that you took that as enough to go on this journey, which you did. most people would probably have seen that image and go, oh my goodness, that's not for me. But you read something far deeper into it. You saw the peace in that man. But then your piece, at around the age of 40 was violently disrupted, where you experienced the dark night of the soul. Can you talk to us about that? Because it's such a poetic expression. It seems to hold so much violence in it. What did that mean for you?
Well, it was violent. It's a feeling of being burnt alive, but I certainly wasn't the monk, so I still had not, even though I'd studied and been in long retreats, it was basically intellectual, because when I was actually experientially in the middle of the dark night of the soul, I still didn't have the tools to cope with it. I felt like I was completely on fire and running around screaming. I certainly wasn't in peace like that monk was. He'd obviously done the work, so to speak. So it was a really big wake-up call. It was like I went from India and all the discomfort over there and the long meditation retreats and really learning how to control my mind. But then I came back into samsara, or into this capitalist, consumerist Western ideology, and fell to pieces again. I think that we all get caught in the dream, or I certainly did. I got caught into other people's values and beliefs, even though I had learnt with the monks. And the one thing that the monks said when I left at 22 was, don't get trapped in cyclic existence. Don't get attached to things, into those comforts. Know who you are. And, I got lost very quickly. The mind deteriorates very quickly. In India and in the monks in the monastery, we were in a place where it was enforced, that we stay loving and kind, that we act a certain way. We had rules and vows and different things that kept us in that space of tranquility. But of course, when you leave that environment, there's an old saying that, there was a monk that meditated for 20 years and he had hair down to his waist and he felt like he was enlightened until a mouse came and started to eat his hair and he flicked it away in anger. So it's like, once we're faced with reality, that's when the true test comes. How much inner peace do you really have? And I think for my dark night of the soul at 40, it really did open my eyes to the fact that I wasn't resilient, that I wasn't at peace within myself, that my inner world was completely out of control. I got the external part right. Everything looked good, but inside I hadn't done the work.
So where do you go when you reach that point of there's this terrible a conflict, if you like, between how you feel on the inside and then how things appear on the outside? I've had a similar experience. What's been your experience with that moment? What do you do with that? Where do you go? Who do you seek?
Well, it's extremely frightening because there's nothing in our culture that makes it okay. It's basically take as much medication as you can and just get back to work, or otherwise you're stigmatized as having a serious mental illness, So you can't win culturally if you're going through something like this. Whereas in other cultures, it's a really actually big achievement. It means that you're waking the fuck up, right? So it's like you've noticed, or you're in the middle of the Matrix, like the film. You're not taking that pill anymore. You're taking the other pill. You're waking up in this consciousness of the fact that you've sold me a lie. I'm not happy. There's something wrong. I'm not going to take it personally. Joseph Campbell explains it as a collective consciousness thing of evolution. So it's a journey that we all take at some point. It was his belief, and it's mine too. That I just reached a place where it wasn't accepted by society, a lot of the way I was feeling and what I was prepared to do to try and find the truth, basically. So I had to step outside everything that was valued by my family and friends and what I thought was right, including my job. And I took off to find out what this was all about. I ended up in the Amazon with a shaman and lived with him for a few weeks. And that's when I discovered ayahuasca, and I had about 4 or 5 ceremonies. And I think this is how we met at the Psychedelic Medicine Conference, because there are a lot of alternative medicines there for people to deal with these crises. So in other words, to answer the question, there was no support in Western medicine. There was no support around what I was going through. I was very resistant to the therapies on offer. which is where I found myself was in absolute desperation. I was on my knees, and I heard about these plant medicines. A girlfriend of mine I did yoga with her, and she said, look, this ayahuasca is, curing cancer to depression. Like, I had a friend just get back from the Amazon and she's doing great. And I thought, well, within 3 months I was there sitting at the feet of this shaman, so.
Yeah, I'd love to talk to you more about that ayahuasca experience. I just want to go back a little bit from there. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes it takes a major, like a real cataclysmic event, doesn't it, to kind of crack us open. For me, it was the 2008 global financial crisis where I had a whole meltdown watching everything disappear that we'd spent the last 30 years working for, because my whole identity and sense of self-worth was tied up in my net worth. For you, Simone, it sounds like it was pretty much the business that you built that was so successful, this coffee empire, and then the pressure that put on your personal life and your marriage and the ultimate breakdown of the marriage. Can you tell us about that? Just what happened at that point for you?
Yeah, well, I think I had the the perfect family, but the truth was that Jason worked a lot, 12-hour days. We both worked really hard, and we in time became extremely disconnected. So I sort of woke up one morning to the fact that the relationship had died. Was because it wasn't nurtured. We were too in the world, so to speak. We hadn't nurtured ourselves, our spirituality, our inner worlds. There was no calm and peace, and the love had, disappeared. And it was extremely traumatic, that had happened. And on my watch, as the mindful monk from India, on my watch, I'd lost that love and compassion and that connection that, I'd gone to India to find. So again, the world and its demands and stresses and wrong values, as far as I'm concerned, had sort of set me on a different trajectory. It had basically, like what happened to you, was a necessary destruction of old values and into a new path. And this is the thing that I think people mightn't understand. It seems so esoteric and mystical and wonderful, this dark night of the soul, but it's extremely traumatic, and it's well documented. It's traumatic for a reason, because it's the death of everything. It's the loss of everything you've created. You don't know who you are within it, and you're just trusting and taking it step by step. So I think the thing is that if you don't have that framework around it, it can be even more frightening, even psychotic. Yeah, it's just really important to know that this is a necessary rite of passage. I don't know whether it was like that for you, whether you knew that at the time.
I had a sense of it. I think it was like a red pill, blue pill moment in terms of, I think death is inevitable. It's what kind of death do you choose? Physical death where you just go, I want to check out, because that thought definitely crossed my mind. The world would be a better place without me at this point, versus a metaphysical death. I have to let go of something. What is that? And it was really that whole value system, that hard work leads to money, leads to happiness, in that order. That was pretty much the dogma of the 80s. So letting go of that. But the problem with letting go of something, if you have nothing else to hold on to, you almost go into an existential free fall, don't you?
Yes.
It's because there's nothing to land. There's no sense, for me, there was no sense of self. I was terrified. I thought if I do this, if I go inside myself, what if there's no one there? I don't even know who that person is.
Yeah, no, I'm totally hearing you. And I think that's, one of the major things in shamanism and in the hero's journey is that when you get to the abyss, jump. You can't see the bottom. You don't know where you're going, but that's a necessary initiation, and that's the rite of passage, because so many people get to the abyss and they don't jump, okay? They're just going to turn around and go back to their old life. They know they're suffering, but they're not prepared to take that risk. And that's what makes us different, or that person that takes this journey or the hero's journey. That's the point of difference right there. Are you going to take the journey or are you not? And it really is a massive sacrifice, but the gains are incredible. Like when you jump from that abyss into absolute trust, where there's no control, where you don't know who you are or what's happening, there's nothing to hold on to, life becomes extraordinary.
Yeah, you're speaking here about something that feels like faith, and yet in our Western context, particularly in Australia, it seems we have an aversion to anything religious. How would you differentiate what we're talking about from, say, traditional religion?
Yeah, look, there was no external God that was saving me in my journey. I recognized it was within myself. So whatever this intelligence is, it's definitely within me, but it's also without as well, because the synchronicities that come once you jump off that abyss, all of a sudden your prayers are being heard very quickly. There is some support, like you can feel the support, you can feel the movement towards your growth. When you jump that there's no support, as long as you stay in line and you listen and you feel into those synchronicities, the path becomes very clear. And so we learn by this direct revelation, by listening to ourselves and knowing who we are and coming from our own hearts. And so it's a very different way of navigating the world from before.
Yeah.
So it does become a very different journey, a journey within, very much so. So finding the hero within, it's a journey is within. So, if you read The Alchemist, I mean, that's a classic one to do with the hero's journey as well. He goes on this journey of synchronicity and finds his way, and where's he go? He comes back home. That's where he ends up.
Yeah, that's right, home to the self. So if someone listening to this were in that position that you and I have been in, that dark night of the soul, and you say jumping into the abyss, what in practical terms does that mean exactly?
It means trusting yourself. It means trusting yourself and knowing that you're safe. And so it's like normally we have so many trappings that make us feel safe, but really you're not safe. It can all be taken away from you within a second. So it's nothing to do with everything outside yourself. You are inherently unsafe. You're born alone, you die alone. And so basically it's how do you find that safety within yourself? How do you trust yourself enough to hold yourself in whatever happens around you? Where you've just got this going back to the monk in the fire, like there is something there within us that is so strong that it is just completely, or can be completely, apart from everything else. Like we are just like the calm in the storm. We can achieve that. We can be that. And, that's a big part of shamanism, and this journey is becoming strong, like really strong, because there's a lot of impermanence, a lot of change. It doesn't mean that your whole environment changes and everything's great and peaceful and rainbows, not at all. It's a constant choice to stay in that place as well. It's a constant choice to stay in that place within yourself.
And so was it that flicker of faith that drew you to the Amazon?
It was, again, the synchronicities, listening. It's not something that a normal person would do by any means, but the synchronicities come, the information comes, and then you understand that you're being guided by something greater. And I still don't know what that is, but I do know that I am being protected in some way, I don't know, led, and, in a beautiful way. And, so I ended up in, as I said, the Amazon, and that's when my spiritual journey really started to take off. And again, it wasn't easy. Like the shaman are not there to give you a big hug and say things are okay and wave a magic wand and say you are now healed, you are now enlightened. They're there to train your mind and to train you into, and this is the thing, with shamanism especially, they train you into awakening. So you are awakening in every moment. There's not one big Satori moment. In every moment you're choosing awakening by staying in the path of integrity. So in other words, if you do an action that's going to bring suffering, or you do an action that's going to bring some sort of peace for yourself and others. So in every moment we're choosing awakening, so to speak, and that's what the shaman teaches. That's what the ayahuasca taught me.
And can you describe the experience? Because there are so many different tales that we hear about ayahuasca, and some of them sound potentially scary, like seeing things that are images that might be troubling or hard to process. Can you describe your experience with ayahuasca?
Some people say, look, I had a bad trip or I had a good trip. I don't see it as a drug, and the reason why is you can really feel this intelligence. It's an incredible intelligence that is I cannot even describe it. If you haven't met God or seen God, you will in the ayahuasca in terms of this spiritual force, so to speak, that is there guiding us and teaching us. So it's quite profound, the experiences you have with the ayahuasca. Even if you're a non-believer, it's just quite a profound experience. And those bad trips, really the ayahuasca just shows you your own mind. So when you say a bad trip, that's you, so that's going on behind the scenes. I mean, it just takes away the veil. You're experiencing yourself, so I think that's another big part of it. It's facing our fears.
Yeah.
And it's not, it's like Harry Potter when, that clown comes out of the box, or they choose what the fear is and the spider comes out of the box or whatever. Ayahuasca is pretty much like that. Like, it's going to bring up stuff that you need to face. And just like they did, I don't know what they said, whatever the thing was, but it was definitely around, I'm not scared or disappear or go away, whatever, facing the illusion of fear. That just reminded me of the ayahuasca experience, because that's pretty much what it's like. So yes, it can be confronting, and it can also be so beautiful. I mean, you could, a lot of within the Indigenous cultures, there's nothing written down around religion or spirituality. It's all by direct revelation. So ayahuasca is it's the pathway to get divine information. So on the other side of things, I mean, they're hard journeys sometimes. Sometimes they're absolutely beautiful, like the information that you find out about life, your existence, who you are. It's beautiful. It's unexplainable.
Yeah, I think that's such an important message, because I think our minds prime us for ugliness, don't they? The worst case scenario, what's black and dark about us. And so we extrapolate that, we go further into ourselves, we're going to get more of that. But in fact, the opposite's true, isn't it?
Yeah, look, it's such a unique experience. I've just experienced so many layers to those journeys, and layers of going into darkness and what that means. And, the dark teacher, I call it, like, there's so much beauty within it. And it is so true around the integration of the shadow. I never quite got that, but now I do. And some journeys can be so hard, and sometimes you just have to see it or acknowledge it, and other times you have to transcend it or learn how to not be it. And then other times it's like, oh, now I'm being a victim, now I need to be the hero and rise out of this. Like, there's so many different journeys it takes you on to evolve your inner spirit. And that's the thing too, that afterwards, after these experiences, it's not like, oh, I had that situation. You actually in most cases changed for life. You changed for life. Like, the transformation is just so intense. That doesn't mean you don't have integration and have to honor the teachings, but it's pretty transformative.
So Simone, there was a line that you said the other day. You say we're dragged through life until we wake up to our calling. So what do you regard as your calling?
Yeah, there's so much. It's such a layered question. It's, when I lived with the monks in India, their calling was to be a good person and a loving person in every moment. And when I lived with the shaman, it was the same, because he was a medicine man. And so a medicine man is a man that has medicine within them, and in every moment they share their medicine. So their medicine is their wisdom, their medicine is what they've learned, their love, their compassion, and they become healers. They're healers. So in every moment, for me, my calling is to be that. That's all it is. I don't have a purpose as such in the world anymore. It's just being the medicine. So, and how does that translate? It translates in terms of, walking past someone in the street and giving them a smile, being attentive. It could be that someone needs a hand with something and I'm just there for them. So, I have a friend that has cancer in Queensland that I can't see at the moment. Every week I send her a thoughtful gift. It's just going that extra mile to share your medicine and make sure everyone around you is cared for and loved. And I can't tell you how beautiful that is to live in that way. So if that's probably the greatest gift that I've been given from all of this, that there was nothing but coming home and that beautiful sense of what can I give to this world.
Yeah. What's interesting about that, because to the Western mindset, it's like, yeah, but what are you doing? You can't just send presents to everyone. But what I'm hearing there, it's almost like, they use the lotus flower as a metaphor for the opening up. So when you're engaging in acts of kindness like that, it's the ultimate act of kindness to yourself, isn't it? You're really being kind to yourself. And when you're kind to yourself, that's when, the things that you love to do, you actually give yourself permission to do them, because why wouldn't you? Do you kind of get that sense that pathway to kindness actually then allows you to fully blossom as the person you were born to be?
Totally. And it's like, it sounds so simple. I remember the Dalai Lama, we're in a big group and he was talking, saying, and someone asked, what's the secret to happiness? And he said, serving others, being kind to others.
Mm.
It's like it's really hard for us to get that because, we're not in tribal cultures where we're interconnected, we rely on everybody, we're dependent on others. That way of thinking, that philosophy is very big in villages and Indigenous cultures because they believe we're all interconnected, that spirit is in everything. It's a different way of thinking and being. But, just in terms of, they have this law in the Andes, it's called Heroine, which is the law, like the cause and effect in Buddhism, or the law of giving and receiving. And this Heroine plays out in the most profound way. So I just mentioned giving gifts to my girlfriend as an example of me sharing my medicine. And I came home today to a message, bunch of flowers and some cookies on the doorstep, and then a girlfriend arrived with some chicken soup. And it's just amazing what you get back. Not that I'm doing it to receive anything back, but I am receiving so much back. And it's not from the same person, but for some reason universally. And so this is the thing, like, you have to live this to understand it. It doesn't make sense, but you have to live it to understand it.
Yeah, that's right, exactly. And we're so conditioned to define our experience according to the physical world. It's like, how can you believe in God or have faith? And it's almost like, well, if you had physical proof, it would no longer be faith, would it? You're not making that leap. And yet we kind of demand tangible evidence all the time before we will take the plunge. So,
yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think we're being guided by unseen forces and we are rewarded. And it's really acknowledging those rewards, like I'm saying to you now, just illuminating what's happening in my life, like fully being aware of what's happening to those synchronicities and that law of cause and effect. Makes you want to behave and be a different way in the world, which is who I've become, from, before the dark night to after the dark night, where I was essentially a very narcissistic, selfish person, let's face it. And so, I've really grown into a totally different human being in this process.
Yeah, so just on that subject of narcissism, and it feels like, to evolve in some way or to grow, we have to grow from something. And, I hear a lot of people going, well, growth for me is a total dissolution of the ego. What do you say about that?
Growth is a dissolution of the ego.
Yeah, that in order to really become enlightened, I have to dismantle my ego totally. What's I'm not saying there's any right or wrong answer here in terms of ego, but I'm curious to know, what's your take on that? The role of the ego in our mental, emotional space.
I think for me, I have a strong sense of self, but it's a transformed sense of self. So I know who I am in the world and I'm very aware of my choices and my awareness, but it's not coming from a place of lack or selfishness or destruction like it was. So my emotions were extremely negative. My intentions probably were as well. Whereas now I'm coming from a space where there are positive intentions, where I'm intentionally creating good in the world. It's changed the landscape of my whole life. So I think that, and I learned this with the monks as well. Like, I went into a 3-month meditation retreat in the Himalayas where, I was so high up the mountains around my hut. So I was very isolated. And so I spent a lot of time with my own mind. And I know what it's like to have an enemy within you or a best friend within you. So very aware of when I have those negative emotions and what's good thoughts are different. Do good, feel good. Think good, feel good. There was a lot of different formulas and different ways of being that I learned from being alone. But one of the things the Lama said, just watch those thoughts, and as they come up, transform them. So there's still a sense of ego or mindfulness of some sort of center that's seeing, that witness is seeing, but not just seeing, but transforming.
Yeah.
So transforming anger into example, so you're getting more understanding, like changing emotions into compassion, so there were different tools they taught us. And so, I do that a lot even now. So as I said, I don't believe awakening is just completely wiping out the lens you're seeing through. I think the lens you're seeing through is one choice you make. Is how I see my life now.
That's a really interesting take on it. So the lens is always there, and it's how clean you want the lens to be. So I invited you to do the magic triangle exercise, Simone, and so we all have different ways of finding ourselves and getting a sense of the self. And you described your, experience with ayahuasca, and we'll talk in a moment too about the work you're now doing, because I'm sure people will be interested to hear about that. So, we have our different ways. It's interesting. We might have very different experiences, but that dark night of the soul seems to be like a common element in the hero or heroine's journey. So, how I like to work with geometry and triangles in particular. So we're going to take a look at your triangle, and just to explain. So what this is to help get clarity on what's really important to us, not in the material sense at all. So I used to think of goal setting as like, okay, well, I want to make this number of dollars per year. I want to have this type of house and this type of car. And that was my measure of success. And that did not end well. So this is really to help people really drill down to what's important, what their innermost self might be yearning for. And it brings up three core needs. So the three core needs that came up for you, Simone, are partnership, love, and transcendence, with transcendence sitting at the top of the triangle. So in terms of reading the significance of this, what I'd like to do is a bit of an exploration into each of those core needs and what they mean for you. Why did they come up out of however many, 150, 200 that you had to choose from? Why these three came up? So let's start with partnership. Can you tell me about that? Why is that important to you? And how do you define partnership? In your world, what does partnership mean?
Well, I think, it's never about me, it's about we. So there's this incredible interconnection that we have that I tap into all the time. Partnerships, relationships, they're all important to me. We thrive off each other. There's been experiments where after the war, they had 10 babies in a ward where they had milk, and they had another 10 babies in a ward where a nurse picked them up and cuddled them. And the ones that got affection survived. So we need people. We need partnership. It's important.
And in your life, Simone, does that mean a partnership in business sense, or a partnership like a significant other? How do you see that manifesting in your life?
I think, look, all those pieces are really important, like business partnerships. I'm always very respectful and I honour every relationship I'm in, because I know that it's only through the kindness of others that we get through in life. We don't often recognise it, but there's the kindness that someone's done to you to get you to where you are today, and sometimes we forget. But I'm very aware of the opportunities and things that people have given me. And so those partnerships for me are really important. So, they're in every sphere of my life. I'm feeling like probably after my divorce, I haven't had, a loving partnership for some time. So that's probably the key partnership. And I think that will even help me thrive more. I think the other core need I had was, love. And so giving love into my community, into my family, and into that partnership will be just a beautiful new piece of the pie.
Yeah. And tell us about love. What does love mean for you? These words have so many meanings behind them. So just getting your take on love, how important that is in your life.
Yeah, well, look, I think at the end of the day, and we're talking about the hero's journey, it's all for me was coming back to love, so opening up the heart. I'd experienced a lot of trauma from when I was younger. My heart was very closed. And so when you're coming from a trauma heart, the values that you have are very different. I wasn't feeling into what I wanted and feeling what was most important. And when you're talking about setting goals and so forth before, for me, having a goal as a feeling is really important, because you can have everything but still not feel love. And what's the core emotion that makes everything just grow and thrive and be wonderful? It's love. So to me, it's very important. It makes everything great.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think love is perhaps where we started, and then we start to veer away from it, and then we have to bring ourselves back. But in a whole new, with a whole new level of experience and understanding.
Yes.
So thank you for that. And then the final one, transcendence. That sounds very juicy. Tell us about transcendence. What does that mean?
Well, I think, you create your life, and whatever your intention is, you become, and the whole matrix of your life sort of shifts. So this is why I think these core values are so important, because for me, it's always been transcendence. So that's why I've been on the journey I have. And so this is why what you do is so important, because we start to focus. Once you know what those needs are, it's almost like the whole world just changes into what you need, and it's quite profound. My journey is so different to other people's, because my intention has always been to transcend. So as soon as I learned about enlightenment and transcendence, and that we could achieve these altered states of consciousness, and that we were perhaps here for something more than just consuming, and it was a journey into becoming beyond the human self and discovering the spiritual sense, and the fact that we're awakening into this greater sense of purpose, or this connecting with this greater intelligence, or however you want to frame it. That's been my journey. So that's why my journey is different to other people's. So I don't know what other people's core values are, but they're certainly driving the reality they're creating.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I've taken hundreds of people through this exercise, and I've never come across a duplicate combination of core needs. And so everyone's path is different. With transcendence, just to explore that a little further, can you describe the journey transcending from what to what? What's the, if you like, what's the A and what's the B?
Yeah, well, I think, it's what we've been talking about with the hero's journey is one of spiritual awakening. So it's awakening to the fact that there is something greater guiding us, that we are not alone. And so when you sort of wake up to that, and you start to see the synchronicities and the different things happening in your life becomes very different, very different. So my life is very different to what it was. I feel I have a lot of trust. I'm so strong. I'm so loving. I feel like I'm not alone, that I'm always getting some sort of divine revelation or something beautiful happen. I'm very responsive to what's happening. Like, I do good, I feel good. I do bad, I feel bad. Like, it's just a totally different experience. So I guess you navigate life differently. You have a different compass for life. So you're still in the world, so to speak, but not of it. I'm not so attached to things. I'm not so lost. There's a sense of, I'm the watcher. And then in the watching, you have a choice in terms of how you want to react. I'm not there yet, but that's just my experience of where I'm at now. And so that's how I transcend it. So we're transcending our human limitations. We're transcending our subconscious programming. We're transcending the limitations and beliefs that we accumulated from our ancestors, from our genetics, our parents, that all that conditioning. We're transcending society and culture. Yeah.
So thank you for that, because just the fact that you're talking about transcendence is starting to normalize it and create it as this is what we do as, as physical beings. I guess 1 foot in the material, 1 foot in the ethereal, right? Not just being totally bogged down in the material and the quicksand that is.
Yeah. Well, how would you describe it? Because I'm just interested with the name of your business. That fascinates me.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, and this could be a totally false definition according to traditional definitions, but I think transcendence for me is, and they're all different, but transcendence for me is escaping the prison of the self, what we perceive the self to be, which in my case was defined by my physical world. So I had a big house on the waterfront, so I felt like a person of significance. And then suddenly, as the collapse of Lehman Brothers kind of blasted that whole notion into the stratosphere, I went, oh my God, so I'm nothing. And then this, so it's really, it feels like it is like the chaos preceding the destruction, and then the destruction preceding the creation. There's a recreation. I guess that's what we call rebirth. That's how I would call it. And I don't think it ever ends, does it? It's a constant process, almost like an expanding spiral outwards every time we're expanding, but the journey never ends.
But you've woken up to it or become conscious of it. Like you haven't gone back in there, you haven't fallen to pieces and then the institution. You haven't redone everything that you did before. Like you've actually woken up and become conscious of a different way of being.
Totally, yeah. I think, that expression awake is awake, you can't unsee. And, it's interesting, the metaphors of the fairy tales, like we have Sleeping Beauty, all this, spell cast on her and she was doomed to eternal sleep. And then it took love's first kiss to wake her up.
Yeah.
And so I think with that moment, you can't unlive it or you can't rewind from that point. Then the question is, okay, how do I go forward? What does going towards the sunset, living happily ever after really mean? So let's look at that actually in the context of your triangle. What's the triangle informing you here? So it informs on two levels. One is your inner world and the other is your outer world. So the inner world being the personal journey for you. And essentially what it describes is that transcendence is where you're heading towards. It's like the North Star, if you like. But the way there is through partnership and love. So it's quite interesting. In numerology, I don't follow numerology, but apparently the number 3 is a symbol of the child. And when you look at the triangle, it's almost like you have the two parents at the base of the triangle that create the child at the top. So through partnership and love, the creation is transcendence. So you need those two foundational needs met to experience transcendence. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely it does.
Yeah. So that's the inner voyage. And where it gets interesting, as above, so below, as within, so out, so external to us. When you stay true to this path, this also describes what you have to give to the outer world. So let's look at transcendence, therefore, as the most important thing for you. It's your highest value. And when that core need becomes your highest value, in other words, when you live true to that, so it becomes, who you are, what you represent, that in a sense is your why, that's why you do what you do, so that you can transcend. But it also is what you give to others. So the gift you give to yourself is what you give to others. So transcendence really is why you do the work that you do. And we'll talk about that in a moment. Why someone works with you, because that's the journey ultimately you're here to take them on. And then the what. So you've got your why at the top, which is transcendence. The what is partnership. So what you bring is a sense of partnership. So when you're working with someone, there's no hierarchy. It's not like, oh, I'm the superior therapist and you're the poor suffering patient, right? You're working in partnership with someone on a sense, with a sense of equality. Like we're all in this together. We're all connected. Does that make sense? That partnership describes the relationship you have with your clients and with other people in your life. So it's almost like a horizontal structure as against, a vertical silo structure. And then how you do that is through love. So the how is love, that third need. And love is how you get these results for people, because you are coming from a platform of love. There's no judgment or criticism of the self or of others in you doing the work that you do. Does that make sense?
I love that. Like, I just cannot believe how much clarity I've got and direction I've got. And I feel like from what you've said, unless you honor that, really things are very slow to manifest, or there's a little bit of sluggishness or this feeling of, what's going on here? Like, as we were talking before, how having those intentions just create things so quickly. I think it's a very powerful tool to get on top of those intentions and what you're actually creating.
Yeah. Well, why you can trust it, Simone, it comes totally from you, and it actually comes from your pain. So these needs are informed by your pain. Pain, I think, is the most maligned human experience because, you know, when you alchemize pain, it becomes gold, and this is your gold. You've endured the pain of broken partnership. You've endured the pain of feeling unloved and feeling probably like unlove, and probably the pain of whatever the opposite to transcendence is. And in fact, this is the next step in the process. But I don't always go here, but it might be worth doing this, because whatever it is that can threaten you on this journey, achieving this journey or continuing on it, we need to address. And in our society, we tend to run away from whatever we don't want to confront. So if you just imagined that transcendence is your goalpost, if you like, or your North Star, and that sits on the right-hand side of you. So it's out there like this beautiful big star that's beckoning you, that's constantly calling you. And in your pursuit of that, this is, you know, what you have to give to others. So now let's just flip that 180 degrees and imagine what's sitting on the left-hand side of you. What would be the opposite to transcendence? What would be the word that describes the opposite to transcendence for you? There's no right or wrong answer here. It's just whatever pops up.
Well, I think it's ignorance and suffering.
Yeah. Okay. So ignorance and suffering is probably, would it be true to say that you've experienced ignorance and suffering in your life, in your past?
Absolutely. Through not waking up.
Yeah. And would it be true to say that the greatest pain you've experienced would be around that state of being in ignorance and the suffering that comes from that?
Yeah, that's the unconsciousness. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So that really is the problem you're here to solve, is ignorance. So in my process, what we do, that's a big clue. And what we're doing is it's like we're climbing down a ladder. So we articulate what it is we need more than anything. And now we start to walk backwards down the rungs into the darkness of the self to find out what could potentially threaten that beautiful, bright future. So that's the next rung down, and exploring that, and where did that fear come from? That's what we have to find out. So.
Yes, wow. What an incredible model for change. It's just incredible. I'm not normally shocked or taken, you know, so I've done a lot of these things before, but I was that's definitely given me a lot of clarity and direction doing that. I was very nicely surprised by it. And it does remind me again of, you know, the hero's journey. At the end of it, we realize what we go through, we then share with others. That's when we really find our gift, you know. So what is the gift and what do you have to share with others? So I guess what you're saying is that, so to speak, you know, that I've gone on this journey of transcendence and getting out of ignorance and unconsciousness, and now I'm ready to share that with others. So it's a beautiful time in my life to be able to share that.
Absolutely. And this is the advertising person in me speaking now. And when you're marketing what you do, talk about partnership, because I know I've done therapy myself. And one of the things I didn't enjoy was a sense of speaking to someone who would not give anything of themselves. It was almost like a confessional where I didn't know what they were thinking. I didn't know if they'd experienced shame the way I had. And it felt almost like that, you know, we were talking about that servant-master relationship. It even felt a little bit like that. So the fact that you're so accessible and that you're not sitting in judgment, I think is a really important point to make in your, you know, in your marketing copy, to talk to that.
Yeah, okay. No, it's beautiful.
Yeah. So on that, let's talk about what you actually do. Tell us the people that you work with, and what you can do for them. And of course, all the details about how people get in touch with you will be are written down. But just so that someone's listening to this and they're going, I wonder if I could work with Simone, what would that even look like? What would I get from that? Can you speak to that, Simone?
Well, I guess I've come from a background of, you know, owning multiple businesses, and then I've gone into corporate. So I worked with World Vision Australia for some time in senior management. So I have that social enterprise background, and social impact is really big for me. Like, you know, businesses transforming themselves into platforms for the greater good, you know, having environmental impact statements and, you know, doing something for society is great for meaning. And it's also proving to be profitable. So, I've been in that space as a strategist for some time and still sort of lecture with Monash Uni. So, I do work with business people and mentor around that. But my biggest love, and I love to see businesses giving back, because I don't think that charities and government are doing a great job of that. So I think with so many small businesses, it's an incredible offering to have a point of difference. But for me, my heart's in transformational work, to be honest. So, I have a psychology background. I'm, a hypnotist. So to me, the deep work is necessary. We all have some sort of trauma or some sort of unconsciousness or limitation that's holding us back. And I find that doing trance work, just like what the shaman do in Indigenous cultures, is an incredible, powerful way to slow the brain waves down and access parts of ourselves that are literally impossible in normal consciousness. So in shamanism, we call it soul retrieval, where we go and find fragmented, traumatic, parts of ourselves that have been lost or frozen in time, and we bring them home, and we become whole from doing that. And we can do the same thing with hypnotherapy. So it's just basically in the hypnotic state, regressing and exploring where this problem came from and why you're feeling the way you are. And it's so deep. In 2 hours, I can get to places that people have been in therapy for years. Honestly, it's just so deep. When we start to appeal to our subconscious mind and start to speak to it and ask it for the answers. I'm not doing much, but being a guide and holding these people in this space, it's quite amazing the self-healing and self-growth that comes when people start to harness and connect with their infinite intelligence. So that's why when we're talking about God before, I don't know what it is, but it's definitely within and all around us, because I'm speaking to it in the hypnosis. I can see it healing people, not just mentally, but physically. You can appeal to cells and change all sorts of illnesses and diseases. You look at Joe Dispenza's work, he does the same just through meditation. I do offer that sort of work, for business people as well, just anybody that wants to awaken and start to explore themselves in a different way. It's a very powerful technique.
That's really interesting. And so you've totally migrated from the corporate world, selling coffee, to this work. And what's wonderful about that is that essentially what you're saying is you don't have to go to the Amazon and take ayahuasca, that there are other ways to get to that deeper level of yourself. Can you do this work? Can you do this work online, or is it always in person?
Yeah, look, I'm global. So I had a girl in Hong Kong today, Vietnam, UK, you name it. And it's so unbelievable that you can hypnotise someone via Zoom. You just would never have believed it. But that's what they're doing around the world. And so, hypnotism is just like, you're still in control, you're still conscious. It's like a really powerful guided meditation where you're actually looking in the mind like looking at a goldfish in a goldfish bowl. You actually have that capability of seeing the mind like you're watching a movie. That's all you're doing. So it's not like I have control. Otherwise, I would get you to go and rob a bank and bring me back $1 million. I can't do that. All I'm doing is opening up your mind to yourself. And a lot of people have never done that. Even in meditation, they can't visualize. They go to sleep, they can't even remember their dreams. But this will give you actually direct access to what is going on in that goldfish bowl.
And so, if someone's sitting there going, oh, I don't know if this is for me, what would you say to that person, someone who might be sitting on the fence?
Yeah, look, I think, everyone finds their own path in their own way, and there's many ways to do things and many tools. And I would just say you seek out what's right for you, what feels comfortable. I think that it's very deep work. It's very personal work. It's very intimate. And I just think that, like what I did, I literally prayed, like eat, pray, love. Like I was on my knees praying, what do I do next? And next thing I know, I meet this girl in yoga and end up in the Amazon. So I don't know where you're going to be or what might happen to you, but if something resonates or there's synchronicity, follow that and just see where it leads you. And I think that's been the basis of our conversation today.
It has. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, trust and take a step. Yeah.
Yeah, show step. Up.
Yeah.
Jump off.
Yeah. Yes. What a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much. It's just been a delight hearing from you. And I'm sure, and I know the first time I heard your story, I was just blown away by what you put yourself through, what you've done in your life. And I'm sure people listening will be amazed as well. And to not be fearful of finding that bigger version of you, because that person is out there, aren't they? They're waiting.
Absolutely, they are. And The Australian Women's Weekly has picked up on the story, and I'm in it in October, as well as many others that have fought their own personal demons and have gone to alternative therapies to seek help. So I do just, if anyone's out there, there are answers, and there is support for you and alternative ways of dealing with some of these issues. So please seek them out.
Wow, I mean, that's a miracle in its own right, isn't it, Simone? The fact that it's being picked up by, the archetypal mainstream magazine is talking about this. I mean, you'd have to be a bit optimistic about the future, wouldn't you, really?
Honestly, I just couldn't believe it. So it's like to think that when I told Mum that I was in the Women's Weekly in Amazon, she was just like, well, I never thought you'd be in the Women's Weekly, especially not for that. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much and all the best. And I know you're going to help, but you're going to change a lot of lives. So thanks, Simone.
Hopefully. Thank you so much. Beautiful to speak with you.
You have just listened to another enlightening episode of Wake the F Up with Janet Hogan. To find out more about the breakthrough, guided way to get off the hamster wheel and seize a life of freedom and fulfillment, visit janethogan.com/podcast for access to the show notes and to learn more about Janet's breakthrough work. Just remember, finding your true path isn't potluck, it's a process. Until next time.